is the third circle.
More than just watching football, it's a way of life.
In the July Revolution, an incident took place. During the evening of the first skirmishes, it turned out that the clock towers were shot at independently and simultaneously in several places all over Paris. That's a quote from Walter Benjamin's text On the Concept of History, published in 1940. But why were those French revolutionaries shooting at clocks? What primal motivations drove such destructive behaviour? Writing some 27 years after Benjamin, philosopher Herbert Marcuse offered this contextualization. In all corners of the city of Paris, there were people shooting at the clocks on the towers of the churches and the palaces, thereby consciously or half-consciously expressing the need that somehow time must be arrested, that at least the prevailing, established time continuum must be arrested, and that a new time must begin. A lot of time has passed since that first evening of fighting on the warm summer day of July 27th, 1830. The Earth has orbited the Sun almost 195 times since. That's 71,071 days, 1,705,704 hours, 102,342,240 minutes, and 6,140,534,400 seconds. That's a lot of numbers. You might say too many to make sense of. But that's exactly what we're going to try to do today here in the third circle. We're going to try to make sense of time and discover how this mysterious fourth dimension constrains, shapes and influences how the game of football is played and perceived. We're going to be looking back to move forward, piecing together disparate timelines. We're going to be thinking fast and slow, speeding up and slowing down, accelerating into oblivion before screeching to a halt to find out what happens when time stands still. We live in an age when we feel time is running out. We waste time when we should be making time. Time is money, time flies, and we're only ever a dice roll away from hitting the big time. The tick-tock of the clock on my wall reminds me that time waits for no man, not even you, Martin Raffelt. Martin, the time has come. We're back in the third circle. How does it feel?
I had a long time to prepare my line here, and I decided for the following line. It feels like it's about time.
Very nice, Martin. Very nice. Touché.
I'm like, as I'm not a native speaker, I'm not always sure if puns play out as they play out in my head, but I think this one works.
No, the famous German sense of humor is working well, right from the kickoff. Hey, I started this that substantial intro by talking about the French Revolution. I don't know if we're starting any revolutions here. It's early days for the Third Circle, podcast. But before we get into today's discussion, I want to thank everyone who has listened, downloaded, subscribed, and commented so far. The Third Circle is already expanding rapidly, and we have no idea what strange metamorphoses are lying in wait for us. We're so glad to have you with us on this journey into the unknown. As we always say, anyone can be part of the Third Circle, so please let's open those communication lines. Give us your feedback. Some of you have already left your comments on Spotify and Twitter. We read them all, so please keep them coming, and we want to interact with them more and more as we allow the forces from the outside to flow freely into the Third Circle. With that said, let's get to today's topic. Diego Simeone, this is he's not a philosopher, right? But he's a coach we're all familiar with. He said something quite profound. He said, "Time is the greatest architect of reality." I like that from Simeone. Interesting. What does he mean? How is time affecting football? And
I'm baffled that this is a Diego Simeone quote.
maybe it's like a PR troll or something. Like, I don't know, because it was actually I think in relation to João Felix. I think someone said something about what João Felix is going to do after he leaves Atletico, and I think Simeone was somewhat skeptical, and he said, "Yeah, time is the greatest architect of reality." Nice one from Simeone though, and. Yeah, time is always in play, of course. And when I'm coaching on the touchline, one of the things you hear a lot from coaches, and maybe you said it yourself sometimes too, is things like, "Hey, come on, we need to move the ball faster. We need to do this quicker." But then at the same time, sometimes you might hear the same coach say, "Calm down, relax." By the way, I always find it funny when the coach is like wildly gesticulating to the players to relax. It's always one of my favorite moments. But yeah, there's this and you hear it a lot with punditry as well. Yeah, they just need to move the ball quicker, then they'll break them down. But it's not always that simple. And it was interesting in the game recently. We had Man City against Real Madrid, and both of those teams, this season have had significant issues, I think, with timing in terms of when to attack fast, when to circulate the ball a little slower and prepare themselves to attack. And it seems it's not so simple, right? It's just saying, we just need to speed up or we just need to slow down. There's lots of factors in play that are influencing when the correct moment to do things is in football. And I think it could be interesting, Martin, to get some initial thoughts from you on this temporal problem that we seem to be facing in football.
Yeah, I like that example that you're bringing up, because it demonstrates quite well how the speed aspect of the game is sometimes, because it's a very visible aspect. It's very clear to see. They are playing fast now. They're playing slow now. It's very clear. But how that does very often not work as the basic idea behind the play. So you cannot play fast by saying let's play fast. Very often, and what a very common thing is that commentators say in football games, at least that's the thing in Germany. I'm not sure if it's with English commentators the same, but very often it's like, you see, when they play fast, it works. So a team makes a couple of quick actions, gets into the box, gets a shot off, and then they're like, now they play fast and it worked, and before they were playing slow and it didn't work. When like the simplest way to describe my point is, I think, imagine like the center back has the ball, and he's like in the line with the striker, and the striker is completely free, and the midfield is gone. So there's just a straight line to the striker, and he can play to the striker, and the striker can turn and take a shot. Imagine that is a scenario that is possible. This is a very fast way of playing, and this is obviously a very good way of playing, but it works because the defenders didn't defend the direct path. And usually what forces you to not play very quick is that you don't find these quick paths towards the goal, because the quick path, the obvious path, the simple path is what the defenders block first. So you have to take the second path and the third path, and then the game becomes slower naturally. And the idea is to create options in a way that allow you to at some point find the quicker path, or to find things like dribblings in a certain moment, or whatever tactical ideas there are, in order to create more options to play a little bit quicker. But it's not about the speed, it's about the options. You need to have an option to attack in order to attack quickly. You cannot, if you just want to attack quickly and you don't have an option, you are just kicking the ball somewhere, and it's ping pong.
Yeah, because you hear coaches talk about words like rhythm and tempo, right? And they're not sometimes talking about, let's play fast all the time. Some are, and we can get onto that. But there's this idea that it's about being neither early nor late, right? I'm reminded of Gandalf here in Lord of the Rings. A wizard is never late, right? And he arrives exactly when he means to.
You're late. A wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
That's a great line actually for like good dribblers.
Yeah, well, we call them wizardry, right? Wing wizards. We call them, yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Riquelme is never late, nor is he always arrives when he needs to.
Exactly, arriving at the right moment, and this is this very key aspect. And you described some of the factors there that are going into this perception of what that moment might be. But it seems that in many football systems, and you mentioned already some of the punditry, and I think I'd probably say there's like a prevailing discourse that like speed is good, right? Like high tempo is good in football, and it's like you hear these words like intensity thrown around a lot. Intensity is always a word I've found some kind of annoying in football. Obviously it means it means various things, doesn't it? I mean, intensity outside of a football context, but I suppose like in a very to get a very almost scientific definition of intensity, it's something like actions over unit of actions per time unit or something like that. So you're looking to try to do a lot of things all the time. We could then add a quality aspect into that and say we want to do a lot of good things, in those time periods.
And what can be confusing is that, especially in the English-speaking sphere, I think people tend to use intensity as in like the amount of force that is in the actions, and not as the frequency or speed of the actions. So like a duel, like when two players collide and there's a lot of force in the collision, then people say it's high intensity because like this action. The action itself has a high intensity, not the game has a high intensity. So I think this can be very confusing, because this is like, because also both things are connected to just the general fitness and physical level of the game. So when the physical level is higher, you usually have more intense duels and such, but you always have usually a higher frequency in the game.
Yeah, that's right, and that's probably contributes to the annoyance. I feel sometimes. I think this word is kind of used in different registers a lot of the time, and some of the meaning gets lost, because you can also just say it's an intense atmosphere here today, right? The atmosphere is intense.
Yeah,
and that feeling of pressure or energy or something like that. But yeah, like you say, I think a more football action definition is to do with the frequency of the actions that are taking place, right? And that's something that we've mentioned Red Bull already in previous episodes. And I think that's something that school of thinking coming from Ranić and others, the architects of that movement, we're really trying to optimize, right? We're trying to use as their primary weapon was maximizing intensity, maximizing actions per unit of time, right? Something like that.
Yeah, I think I always thought that it's very logical that the Red Bull concern, who is like, it's an industrial approach, and that an industrial approach will select time as the element that they want to optimize, because this is the thing where you can be consistently better. If you are faster than your opponent, you are probably always faster, right? But when you have better timing than your opponent, which is like maybe more, you would more think of like the skillful players. They have the timing, they have the control, they control the time. They are not like, they're also great players who are just faster than their opponents, but they're like the best. They also like control the moment. And this is less stable, this is less predictable. I can have generally a better timing than you, but you will find moments where your timing is still better than mine because I got it wrong. And with speed, it's not the same. If you take a average fast player and you let him sprint against Adeyemi or Cristiano Ronaldo, or Mbappe, they will always be faster than them, always. And that creates a certain predictability and controllability.
And you mentioned sort of the timing of the skillful player on the ball. Do you think this is then at one of the reasons that Red Bull prioritized almost reaction to losing the ball as something that they could really weaponize in terms of speed, in terms of that speed of reaction of the players collectively at the moment of ball loss? Of course, this is the famous Red Bull defensive transition or negative transition moment, which is based on a collective recognition of an interpretation of the players of the ball lost moment, and then they want to, as fast as possible, get from where they are to the ball again, win that ball, and then once they win it, another time sequence starts, and they want to try to shoot or score within like a set period of seconds. And this was because this was found to be the most effective way. So it's interesting already that we have maybe a little bit of a difference between timing of like a player choosing a moment on the ball, a skillful player, that might involve some slowing down, right? As I'm sure we're going to get to. But this Red Bull defensive transition is almost just speed, right? It's like, just be fast.
Yeah. That gives me an interesting thought, which is that I think these two things, that Red Bull is focused on speed and that Red Bull is focused on quick transitioning, that's not, like, I think those are two different, like, they are not necessarily connected, these two things. You could be focused on transition, but then more focused on quality in your play. Like, let's say we want very good dribblers and we not necessarily want the fastest players. Or you can also, and this is an interesting thought, you could focus on speedy players, having fast players, but then not necessarily play from transition. And I find this thought interesting because I can't think of a team who did this, because still when you're in possession, speed is still the number one trait to attack depth and to get behind the last line. And so it wouldn't be very unreasonable to say, okay, we take Mbappe as a central striker, so we can always send him deep. So then, because the opponent have to basically, and maybe we also take two wingers, and also they are all the time on depth. So the opponent has to, basically with their last line, they always have to be passive, and then we can play in between the lines, and then we can create from there, and always like, but our idea is always very, very much focused on playing behind the last line, and basically whenever an opponent makes the wrong step, we will have the pass in behind, and we are gone. And I can't think of a team who is like who was super focused on this approach.
Yeah, and that certainly wouldn't be really a Red Bull possession approach, right? They would look to more fire the ball forward just as quickly as possible, and look to create one of those transition moments.
Yeah, even Red Bull creates situations with very small distances, so very small spaces, and small spaces are bad for quick players. For fast players, it's better for like twisty players who can stop very quickly and who can turn very quickly. So like the Red Bull position approach seems more to fit players like Iniesta and not so much players like Ronaldo.
Right. Of course, we haven't mentioned, we probably won't go into it now, but the whole, let's say, corporate branding aspect of the selection of like speed, intensity as the mode of play for Red Bull, which is of course an energy drink, right? So it fits well. They have Formula One teams, extreme sports teams, kind of high adrenaline, right? The heart is a high BPM, right? It's all about that kind of adrenaline rush, this kind of thing, and it leads to interesting places. I saw a clip of Jesse Marsh, who is about as Red Bull pilled as I think a coach could ever be, right? But perhaps not even particularly good representation of actually what someone like Rangnick wants to see. But he was being asked about breaking a low block. Like, it's very tricky. The idea was, it's tricky these days, lots of people defending in a low block. And Marsh's go-to answer, the first answer, was, well, we can get a negative transition moment, and we can, because they're disorganized in that moment, we can win the ball back super quick, and we can attack them.
You ask quite simply, what is the best tactical solution to score against low block defending?
So one thing is counter pressing. What we find is, again, when we saw that video that I showed when we counter pressed, is a lot of times when teams win the ball back, they get relaxed, or they feel like they're back in control of the game. So sometimes against a deep block, we say that we want to play in tight spaces and we want to play with combinations. And at times we almost want to lose the ball, because then we can counter press because we're all in good spaces and we're ball orientated. And when we win the ball, we can play very vertically, and the other team is relaxed for a moment and we can catch them that way.
So this becomes, and if you watch a Marsh team, like they are very, they just, and this is the point I think I'm leading to here is that, yeah, we can go for speed, we can go for speed of action and high tempo of the timings, but this is football. These are humans. You can go too fast, right? You can try to play too fast football, and it ends up, well, you can imagine in other situations when things start to go too fast, accidents can happen, right? Things can break. There can be, if a train goes too fast, there can be a derailment, and yeah, it breaks down. I think there's like a tendency for people to like that, to be drawn towards it. It's appealing, right? This idea of very high tempo. He's like, oh yeah, and for fans as well, and lots of coaches, very high intensity, very high action. We like it in movies. The movie Speed is it's a classic example, right? 1994, like there's a bomb on the bus, and if the bus goes below 50 miles an hour, the bomb goes off. So like the whole movie is like Keanu Reeves has to try and keep the bus above 50 miles an hour, right? And it's like crash action all the time, and it's crazy. So people like it, it's exciting. But I think, and we could also look at aspects like the number of games now, the physical load on players, the demand on players. For me, this kind of hell for leather, scream if you want to go faster style of football, I find it quite limited, really, in terms of its functionality.
I think what's interesting is that I said before that like speed is the most consistent advantage that you can have, but it's also the advantage which is like it's the least. Like you cannot push it much further than you can. Yeah, you can. You have a player on a certain speed level. You can, like, if you watch how much like 100-meter sprinting has evolved in the last, I don't know, 70 years or so. They made very, very small progresses, and like since Usain Bolt, I think nobody got better than Usain Bolt yet. I think. So it's like there's not so much air that you can use.
There's a human ceiling. There's a ceiling of the natural biological capacity of the human being.
Yeah,
right?
And with timing, even though it's less stable as an advantage, it is you can always have an even better timing. You can even have like when like football timing in football is very often like one player tries to synchronize himself with the other player, and the other player tries to desynchronize himself or asynchronize himself. So basically, the dribbler, when the dribbler goes left, the defender wants to go the same direction, and then when the defender goes the same direction, the dribbler wants to achieve that he can go the other direction in that particular moment. And with this thing, you can always create an advantage. Even like if basically you have this, like it's a little bit a simple way to understand it is maybe that you have these dribbling moves that are fake changes of direction. You have dribbling moves that's a change of direction. I go to the right, then I go to the left. But then there are moves I go to the right, I stop to go to the left, but then I continue towards the right. So this is the second level, and obviously you could go to the third or fourth and fifth level, and we actually see these situations where dribblers like consistently go left, right, left, right, left, right, and they try to create something which can be a little bit chaotic as well. But in that way, you can always have an advantage in moment, no matter how good the opponent is, basically. But when the opponent has a team of, I don't know, Alphonso Davies and Van Dijk and Haaland and Mbappe and whatever, you cannot bank on creating a speed advantage against them. It's just not possible.
Right, and I like the way you're talking about moment then, in terms of timing, and you focused in on there in an individual player interpreting the dynamics of the situation they're in, right? The balance of the defender and momentum of the defender, this kind of thing, and the influence that has on being able to make good timings, right, with the movements. And that is interesting to me because that's a contrast then, again, we had Red Bull as the example, but we can get into other ones now. Even someone like Roger Schmitz, we mentioned him as well, his models at Leverkusen, where the system is this overall system has a timing to it, right? There's like an overriding clock which the players are subject to, right? And look, we all understand that feeling, right? Of living in societies that are, we have time that we all have to adhere to. And I think, just touching back on that intro comment of the French Revolution, this probably is why those guys were shooting the clocks, right? In that moment, because this was an aggressive movement against an established overriding concept of what time is. So this uprising from the bottom was going against this top-down idea of time. And because time is obviously an extremely constraining force when it's weaponized like that, and it has a huge influence on the actions, behaviors, communications of the people who are operating under a certain set of timings. And so then you have this contrast. Schmidt's an interesting one. Schmidt was hell for leather, right? I mean, breakneck stuff. I mentioned the movie Speed. You can go Crank with Jason Statham, and that's basically like Speed, but instead of the bomb on the bus, he has to keep his heart rate above a certain BPM, otherwise he dies from a poison he's been given, right? So the whole movie is Jason Statham trying to keep his heart rate above a certain level in order to find the antidote, right? To stay alive long enough to find the antidote.
So he's doing cardio, basically.
He's doing some super cardio, right? It's actually quite a fun movie. I don't mind Statham. He's quite fun.
I've been poisoned with some kind of Chinese synthetic. You've got to do something for me, Doc.
They gave you the Beijing cocktail. It's cutting off your adrenaline. If you stop, you die.
Schmidt was like from the Red Bull school, went to Leverkusen, crazy high intensity, but he went to China to coach. I think it was Beijing, and he wrote a book. I think it was one of his assistants, and I read some excerpts from it. And he was out there, and there was a passage in it where he talked about realizing that the system, just his fixation on the system, it wasn't transferable necessarily to this environment that he was in China. And without going into too much details of it, they don't go into too much detail in the book, but it was more of he said it was more of a cultural thing. So then there was this kind of dampening of that, like non-stop, always top speed, crash, bang, wallop stuff into a more considered and mixed system, which I think you saw more like, with his PSV and then to his Benfica teams weren't as fast, right, as early in his career. They had, certain players who could, let's say, players who would control the tempo a little bit different, right? Enzo Fernandez at Benfica would jump out as one of those kind of guys. So you get this interesting tension then between this concept of the system as having an overriding, governing set of timings, a clock that the players are all working under, and then the player themselves being actually responsible for the timings of the team, right? And that's something I've been very interested in, and I think goes into concepts like the playmaker, for example, this concept of what a playmaker is. I think oftentimes the playmaker is seen as probably someone who the coach is willing to give temporal responsibility to. And we see that, I think, with Real Madrid, with Cruz, when he left, he was a guy that fulfilled that role. When he went away, oh shit, now how do we control the time? How do we think about
this? Is can I jump in there? Because this is another example of what I said in the beginning, where I think speed follows just options and decisions, and what the playmaker does is basically make the decisions what option is the best right now, and then there are faster and slower options, but he doesn't make the conscious decision, I now want to make it faster, I now want to make it slower. Usually I think it's just what naturally comes to him, because he's feel like the slower options are better now, or the faster options are better now, so I pick this option or I pick that option. I think the principle of speed is not really consciously involved there. It's more of a side product.
Yeah, and you often see those types of players actually really slow down, right? And almost stop with the ball.
It's even like one of the key elements of all of these players is la pausa.
Absolutely.
Right? so that you do not act, that you do not play the pass, that you wait for the next moment.
Yeah, which is such a counterintuitive idea when you think about it in next to what we've been discussing about systems that prioritize high tempos. This idea of the pausa, right? To pause, to stop, and to stop time, right? To actually freeze this thing. And I'm reminded immediately there of, I think it was Valdano's comment.
Germans feel offended from.
Oh yeah, you need perpetual motion, right?
when you do that in Germany and you stop and you don't play the pass, but you wait for a better pass, they're like, "What the fuck is going on?"
Yeah. And Scotland usually don't even get the chance to get to a passing situation. The ball's already been hit down the channel out for the striker to run. This pause idea, Riquelme, the great Argentinian playmaker. He strikes me as an interesting one here because it was Valdano, I think, who described him as a toll booth. Like, that was actually the word he used to describe Riquelme. Actually, do I have the thing here? Yeah, he says, this is Valdano, and this is in The Guardian. A friend of mine calls so it wasn't him, sorry. A friend of mine calls Riquelme the toll booth, says Jorge Valdano, a member of Argentina's World Cup winning team of '86 and now self-styled philosopher of football. And then this is Valdano. When the ball reaches him, Riquelme, it has to stop. The rhythm and direction of play will depend, to a great degree, on Riquelme's level of inspiration. And Riquelme is not always inspired. he ends with. There's this. That's an interesting one, right? Riquelme is the toll booth, so everything stops when you get to the playmaker. And I mean, you can immediately see why this is of a concern for a modern coach, right? To implement a system around that kind of player. But at the same time, there seems to be this advantage, as you've been describing, of players who can interpret the dynamics of the moment themselves. And I think we have this tension now of coaches who want to set their timings, want to set their system to an overriding clock, a rhythm, a correct rhythm. And then do we lose, is it a danger that we lose the conditions for those time interpreters, right? Like Thomas Muller's the space interpreter. Maybe like Riquelme is the time interpreter. Like, do we lose the conditions for those kinds of players to develop and play?
Yeah, that's certainly something that can happen, and you generally have to I think a very important trail of thought. Train of thought is actually what you say. I always think like trail of thought makes much more sense. Whatever. An important one is to think about like certain things when you put it in your system. When your system requires players to do something, and when the system necessarily will lead to a certain thing happening in a certain situation, then in that moment you take away this decision from the player. So when you say if this and that if this and that happens, we play deep, or if this and that happens, we put a cross, then it's not the player who decides the cross, it's just for the player to observe the condition and then put the cross. But necessarily you eliminate all other factors. So you say, I don't know, when for example you might have the rule when the striker is going deep and the defender is not turned yet, so the striker has a movement advantage, then we play the striker deep. If this is your rule, you eliminate the factor of distance. That the ball need to travel longer if the distance to the strikers is bigger, and then your player might intuitively you involve many aspects of the situation in your decision. And intuitively it might just feel wrong for the player to play this pass because he feels like the distance is too big. I will not be able to play this pass, or the ball will be for so much time in the air that the defender can react, or the goalkeeper will get it, or whatever. There can be many reasons to not play this pass, but you might have a rule that eliminates this decision and substitutes it with a principle, and then they have to play this pass even if they feel like it's wrong. And it's important, like in certain things, it's good to have these principles, to have these rules for your players, to make the communication better, for example. But it's very important, I think, to keep in mind that it's a simplification and an automatization. So you take something away from the player and you substitute it with something that is most of the time not perfect. So these principles, these rules, are most of the time, they do not apply to every situation. They only apply to like 8 out of 10 situations. And then for me, the obvious question to ask is then like, how good are my players with their decision making and how much can they improve? If they can improve their decision making, like let's say my principle is correct 8 out of 10 times, then the player with his decision must be correct at least 8 of 10 times to be even. And when the player is able to be correct 9 out of 10 times, then the player is better than the principal. But when the player has just very bad decision making and he sometimes plays the deep pass when it doesn't make any sense, and very often the deep pass is very good and he does not play it, so his decisions are very bad. And even when you work with him on his decisions, he still cannot make his decisions better. Then the principal might help him more. So this is a type of thing that you need to keep in mind when you design a system, I think.
Yeah, and it could be for out of possession as well, right? Principles and triggers.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's why I now tend more and more to use principles not as decisional like substitutes, but more as just decisional, like just to organize and make decisions more conscious. So, for example, you don't say repress if the pass is more than 30 meters long. So there are these pressing triggers actually used in top football.
Yeah, the classic triggers, right? There's many of them. Yeah.
For example, like when the pass is more than when the pass is longer than your run towards the players, you will start to press. And if the pass is shorter than that, you don't press because you will be too late. Rules like that are not uncommon. And I started more and more to prefer rules like simply, if you think you can win the ball, you press. If you think you cannot win the ball, you wait.
Yeah, actually, weird. Intuitively, I've been having similar feelings. You've articulated that really clearly and nicely, very simply, right? Because you mentioned that, like pressing triggers, and you'll see lists. Oh, this coach has 32 pressing triggers, right? And they can, vary from, most coaches will be familiar, I'm sure, with a lot of them. If the ball is bouncing, then the guy can't control it properly. If he's facing his own goal, if it's a player you think is weak on the ball, like it can be various things. It could be zones of the pitch where you want to attack, all these kinds of things. And it gets to a point where pressing has almost been so complexified, right, by all this stuff, all these triggers that I need to teach my player. And trigger's an interesting word as well. It's trigger, the starting gun for the race, right? This timing, the idea of timing that we're talking about. And yeah, like you say, to ask the players, can you get to him? Do you have access? Is one of the words that you might. Can you get to this player to close them down? If yes, go. If not, defend the zone. And if all the team are able to sort of quite well, you take that on board and execute it and perceive it and interpret it in the pitch, you're going to have good pressing, right? A pretty good defense, because they're using very simple an heuristic maybe that you're suggesting. And is that something that we see? The idea of pressing is overly complicated, overly complexified?
I think so. Really, I will offer very soon in the Spielverlagerung Academy. You can sign up for it over spielverlagerung.com.
Martin, your segues are getting smoother, right, to your Spielverlagerung Academy. This one was nice. This is good. Yeah,
yeah, that's an accident actually. But
the best things are usually accidents.
I have it on my mind since a couple of months that I want to make this seminar about pressing made easy. So just explaining pressing, like what is it, how to do it, because I think, and how to analyze it, because I think it's usually very, very simple. You can talk about many details, but when people analyze pressing, it's very often really like 80% of the things that they write are ridiculously obvious. So they describe a pressing scheme, a pressing pattern, and they're like, and then the 6 jumps out to the 8, and then the 10 takes over the 6, and then the winger presses the fullback, and then the fullback presses the winger. And it's like, Yeah, obviously they do that. What else would they do? They are trying to win the ball. Obviously they are pressing the opponents in front of them. You can just say they are pressing the opponents in front of them. They run towards the ball. That's it. It's not you don't need to describe every single detail of it. You just can, yeah, whatever. And I want to give a little bit of a framework on how to do this very simply.
Well, yeah, so simplification of that kind of thing, I think would be really nice. And I guess we've had an era, I suppose, of real hyper focus on intense pressing, right? That's been a real feature of the last decade, maybe something like that, 15 years. Pressing's not new, of course. The idea of pressing goes back a little bit longer. I remember reading, I think it's in Inverting the Pyramid. This is off the top of my head, so total paraphrase. I think it was when Jonathan Wilson's writing about a team in Russia. Was it Victor Maslov's team? Something, I can't remember. Anyway, the point is that they were one of the first guys, right, to do organized, what you might call pressing, like the players collectively making closing down actions. And there was apparently an article in the newspaper the next day. They were like, what is this? This is not okay, right? This is not football, right? This is actually foul play, right? This is these guys are they're exploiting a loophole in the rules here. This is completely unacceptable. So I like that. I like that idea. But yeah, then this concept of pressing has led to this. And again, you get coaches like Pep Linders, maybe someone like that could be an example, or they're just you have to just go all the time, just run all the time pressing. Maybe Postecoglou fell foul of that a little bit as well. It's just non-stop pressing all the time. And I wonder, do we reach a point there when we think that coaches are realizing, especially with physical loads, psychological strain, all these kinds of things, might we see just a drop off in the levels of pressing intensity, or is it always just really good to press as much as you can all the time, or is it much more to do with now maybe helping players to understand when the moment to press is, when the moment to stay is, and that's the key thing here?
I think both. I think it's basically. Intensity means you are giving an impulse towards the opponent that forces a reaction. So you go towards them, so they need to pass away, or they need to dribble you, or they need to do something. You force an offensive action, and by forcing offensive actions, you increase the probability of a mistake. If you don't force an action, if you don't force a reaction of the attackers, they can do whatever they want, and then that they fail is relatively not so probable. And this will become even more improbable in the future. It already became much more improbable. So passing percentages are rising across all leagues, even though teams are pressing more. So
I was going to say, De Zerbi, for example, his whole game idea is based on, he wants you to press, right?
Being pressed, yeah. This is then the next stage, but yeah. But still, this is basically the Serbi says okay, they are forcing us to do an action, so we have this action already prepared. And then the question would be how can we force them into actions which are not included in the prepared actions? But generally I think being more intense in defense, having forcing the opponent to play with higher speed, less reaction time, less amount of less mistake, less error, less space for errors. This is generally good, and it will always be a team who can defend with intensity will always be better than a team who's defending with less intensity. But the question is, where do we press? I can imagine that we do not press the first line of build-up anymore, but that we more consistently say, okay, we let the center backs play and maybe the fullbacks play, and then only when the ball is in midfield, when the ball is on the wings, we are there with 10 players being really, really solid. But at least in these moments, they will probably be very intense. So, this is a little bit the question, if high pressing is still worth it. Because, well, one thing, of course, is and this is for me this is like the big question of football.
Here we go.
This is like this is Pandora's box.
Let's open it. Let's go for it. Open it, Martin.
If the defender tries to win the ball, in theory, if both do the best thing that you can do, is he going to be dribbled or is he going to win the ball? Because if he's going to be dribbled, and I think he is going to be dribbled, because at some point he has to step into the ball, and in the moment where he steps into the ball, the opponent with the ball, he can change direction and go away. So the opponent has only to identify this moment where the defender steps in. And I think this leads the attacker to win this situation. So if this is true, and the attacker would win this situation usually, then aggressive defending would die in the long term, because like basically and this is already a little bit the situation on the wing. When you have fullback against wingers, the fullbacks usually don't attack the wingers. They wait because they know when I go forward they dribble me. So yeah, this is a situation where I already see that, and I think at some point this probably will also happen when you pressure sixes, when you pressure fullbacks, and then maybe at some point when you even pressure center backs or goalkeepers, that it's not worth it basically because you get outplayed too often, and then intensity and high pressing would collapse a little bit.
I love that, and I love that. I'll try to explain why. Because I would see, I see football systems and let's say pressing schemes and systems as a form of technology, right? They're a technology that coaches are going to apply onto the human group, and then it's used to organize the players, and they're going to go and execute the principles, etc. It's a form of technology, and it's very interesting. There's a philosopher called Virilio. And he wrote, Paul Virilio, a French philosopher, he wrote about speed, right? And how speed affects us. And we don't need to go sidetrack into that necessarily. He called himself a dromologist, right? From the Greek dromos, which means race course or something like to move through space with a certain velocity. But he actually wrote about this concept that he called the integral accident, right? And his basic, so it's kind of a simple point, but his point was that with the invention of every new technology, you simultaneously invent the accident of that technology, right? So, I'll give a little bit of a quote here from one of the texts here. So here it is. This is
so before we had cars, there were no cars.
Yeah, exactly, right? So here's a quote. This is from Virilio, right? This is him. To invent the sailing vessel or the steamship is to invent the shipwreck. To invent the train is to invent the derailment. To invent the private car is to produce the motorway pileup. To make craft which are heavier than air fly, the aeroplane. But okay, we don't need to go into it. It's invent the plane crash. You get the idea, right? And this kind of, I suppose, fits in with that idea of, okay, you invent pressing, you push it up to a point, but eventually that technology is going to derail and then we get a motorway pile up, right? And you're showing that, and I agree with you that if players are just going to run, if defensive players when they're pressing are going to run and attack guys with the ball, then yeah, with developments in football, players are going to be able to outplay them. I would agree with you. I think that's the favor is in with the ball carrier in that situation for some of the reasons you've described.
This is basically, I'm just thinking that the moment where the pressing player is running on towards the build-up player is basically when he does not stop, when he actually continues to win the ball. Then he gives the build-up player the opportunity to outplay him when he changes direction at the right moment, right? If this happens, this is basically a duel between speed and moment. So the speed tries to make the moment as like difficult as possible, and then it's still like if the build-up player is good enough to find the moment, he will still succeed. But if the moment is a little bit too late or a little bit too early, because when you change direction too early, then the pressing player can adjust.
If they're not like Gandalf, right? If they're not like Gandalf, they're going to struggle.
If you're not like Gandalf, then you're losing the ball, and then speed wins over moment. But when the moment is correct, then moments wins over speed.
Yeah,
That's actually
nice.
quite interesting.
That's nice. Yeah, that's really cool. What? Okay, we'll keep that and we'll hold that. And what I was thinking as well is, in terms of, I was thinking we were to mention De Zerbi there and the way that his idea, right, for dealing with that, the issue, right, of players aggressively high pressing you all the time and trying to turn that to your advantage, I guess wasn't so much to develop individual players, right, the capacity to dribble those attackers, but was to design a system which it actually could exploit that situation. And this is look, De Zerbi is a highly positional coach. I'm pretty open with the fact that I have a lot of problem with some of the positional stuff, but listen, I like De Zerbi's football. I think it's very interesting. I was interested in it in Sassuolo, in Shakhtar. No surprise in Brighton that he got so much attention. Hey, and actually Guardiola himself said, like, oh yeah, he mentioned timing when he was talking about De Zerbi, right? When De Zerbi was doing all that stuff at Brighton.
Pep, when you spoke about Roberto just then, you said that you tried to learn a lot. What kind of things do you pick up from someone like Roberto?
Especially the time to take decisions. So Brighton is a master to have to pass the ball to the man free, but when I have to pass the ball the man free. You know, they had to move in the right time. And this is the best team in the world. The best.
And like, that was a big thing, by the way, like all in the coaching community, like that was very influential, was De Zerbi's stuff, because it was positional, very much positional, but was an innovation in the positional paradigm, and it was a temporal innovation, right? Yes, of course there was spaces, but it was the timing of De Zerbi's system that was so super interesting. It was definitely for me and lots of other people.
It basically the promise of the system is a little bit that you create what I said in the beginning, you play directly into the striker, and that's usually not possible. So the Guardiola way is we play around the opponent, and this was the promise that we do not need to play around the opponent, but we can just play vertically through the pitch straight towards the goal and create chances much more direct and much faster than necessary.
And it's so fascinating to watch, like what De Zerbi will do often in open play is, let's say when the ball goes to the centre back, is freeze the game, right? The game. So it's like a pauser, but on the whole team, right? Will pause, and so you see the classic kind of motif of that is the centre back with his studs on the ball, Marlon famously at Shakhtar, and then whoever else, and in that moment, it's almost like he made the game. He made time stand still in the game, and it was almost became like a photograph, a snapshot, and like a reset, a set piece moment in the middle of the game. And then that helped the players' communications to all understand, okay, now we know we're waiting. As soon as the pressing action happened, they then had this like meticulously designed mechanisms of up, back throughs and third man connections that would just slice right straight through these kind of hapless guys trying to press the ball. So that idea then of De Zerbi using this kind of collective pause, I think is a really great example of how, my tendency is always to be a little bit suspect of the system, having the timings and be like, it's an overriding authoritarian rule of time that you're imposing onto the poor creative players, right? But it's like, sometimes, man, you have to say, well, that's some system. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that is very interesting, the way he's used a collective pause and has designed a way to go through it. There's drawbacks to it, of course. But yeah, that idea of the pause, of that moment in time, of slowing everything down, becomes a very interesting motif, right? And we've mentioned a couple of players, Riquelme already. Even someone like Joshua Zirkzee, who I see at the Man United, and he struggles right at the moment, and is not, this gets a lot of criticism. He's a player that I see as someone who has that sort of more intuitive ability to suddenly slow the game down. Dennis Bergkamps, I'm talking Dennis Bergkamp's biography in English.
Yeah. I have it in mind since 10 minutes. I wanted to bring up.
Okay, you go for Bergkamp, but I just wanted to say, because it jumped in there, because I don't know if it's the same in German, but the name of his autobiography was Stillness and Speed.
Stillness and Speed.
Yeah.
I read it, of course. For those who are not aware, I'm a huge Dennis Bergkamp fan, and actually my Twitter avatar, this like, do you see the eyes there? This eyes snapshot. This is actually Dennis Bergkamp.
Is it? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think not many people know that, but that's the case.
The secret's out now, Martin. It's out now.
Yeah. And I was like, I watched a video of myself when I was like 14 and playing football, and I was like, what the fuck? I played exactly the same like Bergkamp.
Well, that's good. So you were pretty good, Martin.
Same decisions. So I really felt his play style, I think. But yeah. Yeah, he was. I think. He wants this. Like, was it Henry who said this? One of his teammates from Arsenal said that it's so special that Bergkamp will not play the pass just to have played the pass, but he will always try to play the perfect pass and wait for the perfect moment to play the pass. I think the best example is this assist for, I think, Ljungberg against Juventus.
I know the one.
Under pressure, and he's turning, and it's like, what the fuck? What is he doing? Why is he dancing there? And then suddenly Ljungberg appears, and he's chipping the ball to Ljungberg, and he's in front of the goalkeeper and scores.
Davids, referee got in the way. Good defending by the Portuguese man. And here's Ljungberg now, and Arsenal have men over on the break, and Bergkamp on the ball. Held up by Montero, but he's found some space, and here's Ljungberg, and that is the perfect finish to a perfect evening.
This is a very good example for how basically the idea that many coaches have, especially in Germany, many coaches have the idea that you just need to play very quickly and then you will play successfully. And they will, in this situation where Bergkamp is starting to turn and to dance in front of the Juve defender, they will be like, what the fuck is he doing? He's going to lose the ball. He has to play the pass faster. And they will basically, what I said before, Germans will feel a little bit insulted by players doing La Pausa, because they feel like, no, you have to be faster. And then if you do this, if you actually apply this, you take away the option from the player to find the better action, to improve the situation even more. And this is where like, as we obviously can agree that generally playing quickly and using a lot of speed is a good thing, and it's difficult to defend usually, but there are certain moments where it's not about doing something quickly, but doing something in the right moment, and then you have to completely turn this around. And what I was speaking before, that like waiting for the right moment to dribble the opponent, so when the opponent comes to you, to do it in the right moment. You can only do this when you don't have in mind that you want to play fast. You need to be so calm. It must be so natural for you that you can hold up against pressure, and that physical pressure, an opponent pressuring you, is not psychologically pressuring you. If you feel psychological pressure by an opponent running onto you, you will not be able to find the right moment. In order to find the right moment, the perfect moment, you must be super, super calm, and you cannot have in your idea that you want to play fast. You need to have in your mind, you need to have in your mind that you want to play good, or like very well timed, very, very controlled.
Yeah, and this is the stillness of Bergkamp, right? And this idea that the pause, staying still, it almost opens up or accesses a different perceptual framing of the game, right? In that moment, because everything else is, everyone's communicating or interpreting, let's say, on this kind of idea that everything should be done quite quickly. Oh yeah, he's gonna pass immediately through to Ljungberg or whatever. He's gonna make the through ball, and then people are expecting that kind of tempo to the actions. So when someone completely contrasts that and goes against it, it's like discombobulating for people, right? It's like, and we talked about communication on the last episode in terms of dribbling, and this fits in with that as well, in terms of when they're holding the ball and they're pausing. Okay, they might not just be standing completely still, although that does happen also with some playmakers on the ball. But yeah, they may be twisting and just turning their body a little bit, but not really moving, or certainly holding the ball, not moving it on. it's confusing. It can be confusing for the teammates, but the teammates can learn, obviously, to play with players like that. That's the point. But as you said last episode, it's confusing for the opponent. Like, what is this guy doing? Like, he's not moving the ball at the tempo we expect. And that idea of stillness and calmness, helping to a player to perceive the game in a different way is super interesting. I already mentioned Crank, where Jason Statham has to keep his heart rate right above this tempo to stay alive. The opposite of that, I suppose, we're talking about the pause then, in movie terms, would be something like bullet time from The Matrix, right? Where Neo, he's the one who is able to break free, right, from the kind of networked, coded, systematized temporal framing of reality. And by doing that, by having the ability to, let's say, perceive reality in a more direct way. I mean, direct perception's interesting concept in itself in terms of areas like ecological dynamics. But yeah, Neo in The Matrix, played by Keanu Reeves, directed by the Wachowskis. He has this ability to step out of that coded networked, overarching system time and move into a different temporal mode, which allows him these kind of superhuman abilities, right? These different ways of perceiving and manipulating reality and interacting with all the different aspects of the environment. But I mean, this doesn't seem like a particularly straightforward or easy concept to train in practice. And so how are we doing this then, Martin? Is it we're sitting back with players, going through video scenes, checking what they were noticing, what they were seeing? How does this kind of this idea, this concept cash out in practice?
Yeah. I think giving, like, forcing them into pressure situations, inspire them to actually get out of the pressure, and then giving feedback helps a lot. Like, just bring them in situations where they have to do this, just like dodge the pressure in exactly the right moment, and then you are like, yes, that's what we want to do, and this sticks with the player. This feeling of dodging the pressure, this is such a strong feeling. I think you learn this very quickly, actually. One principle that I want to use more and more, especially for players like wingers, fullbacks, central midfielders, so like the second line of your build-up, is that either you want, with the first touch, you want to break pressure, or you want to attract pressure to break it with the second touch. So you should never waste a touch. That's usually when the opponent is running onto you. You cannot afford this. You cannot like stop the ball and then start the game. You need to you do something with the first touch already. And then this idea that like you do not want, like, even when they press you, even when the risk is relatively high, your main idea is not to avoid pressure, but your idea is that pressure is going to come, and your task is to get through the pressure and not to avoid it and like pass it on to a teammate, which is very often the case when the opponent is pressing well. Then very often a pass is not actually solving the situation, it's just actually passing on the pressure. So you're not pressured anymore, but your teammate is now pressured. So the situation for your team is exactly the same.
Yeah, and that reminds me again, I've talked about the shouts from coaches, right, and the sides of games, and so frequently you'll hear, pass, 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 pass. And this is, it's really constraining for the players when you get this kind of instructions. And, they can happen in training exercises as well, when you reduce touches, when you're demanding a certain amount, change of passes or something like that in a quick period of time. And that becomes the guy from Whiplash, right? It becomes not my, you get angry if they're not playing at your tempo, right? Yeah. It's like, not my tempo. And it's like, this is the thing. It's always tempting to want that. And again, we come back to this idea of time as a means of control, right? Of control over the human group, a control of actions, control of communication lines, a control of perception. It is super tempting to want to make that essentially easier and quicker by imposing the universal clock onto the team, this set of timings from where the principles come from. I mean, there's a strong argument to say that, like, I think it was Lewis Mumford said, like, the most important, like, invention in human history is undoubtedly the mechanical clock, right? Because before there was not, like, a way for all so many people to cohere under one temporal organization, right? And it's so before it would be like ideas of time were actually split up over around the world, right? People would have completely different, and cultures would have different understandings of what time was. There's like stories of like, I think I was reading about a tribe in Papua New Guinea for who the future, right, is uphill and the past is downhill. Cool. So like they would be standing, so they would be standing on like the side of the hill, right? And even if they were looking down towards the beach, they'd say, "Oh yeah, tomorrow," and point behind them up the hill, right? And they'd like gesticulate in this way. So like there's all these different ideas of how time works and how time is formed, and these different temporal schemes that, and obviously the independent subject is going to experience time in different ways. We know that, sometimes it feels like time is dragging. It's like, oh God, the minutes feel like hours and all the rest of it. And sometimes time flies, like when you're having fun, right? The perception of time is different on the individual. And this can happen in football for sure, in different game state situations. So I guess it's really tempting for the coach to want to try to, cancel out those differences a lot of the time by imposing the overriding temporal system onto the team. And that can have big advantages, no doubt. It can have big advantages, as we've talked about, like someone like De Zerbi, a master of that kind of thing. But when you do that, you lose a lot, right? You are losing also this other mode of let's say, coaching, of, let's say, helping the players to understand themselves how the timing works in these moments and the dynamics that are happening around them, the opponent's movements, the speed of ball, the teammates' movements, runs. How are those things, that interpreting that environment, how do those things actually feed into the timing of the move? So I think it's not always they're not easy to go together, to put those two things together. And I guess most systems these days, I don't know, would you say most systems tend towards a more systemic time rather than this older way where you just gave it to the players and you had this great playmaker, and maybe it's gone a little bit too far, and now we're seeing a suggestion that, we get the importance of this universal time, but maybe a bit of temporal agency to the players coming back is going to help.
Yeah, and Real having so much success, especially with Kroos and Modric being the clockwork basically of the team. Is also like pointing into that direction. Because I'm a rebel by heart, or other people would say I'm a troll, and I'm just thinking about what I would like to suggest as the most important invention over the mechanical clock. And I'm like, okay. I'm drawn between either coffee or the ball. I think I tend very, very, very strongly to say no. I think the most important invention is the ball, or maybe the teddy bear. I'm very much thinking like this would be also a very good statement.
Yeah, I think I know coffee's an invention. I guess.
I mean, like coffee as a drink is an invention.
Okay.
If you want.
Yeah. The ball, very nice. Yeah, I think you have to get that one in on the third circle, Martin. I like it. The teddy bear, just because it helps the kids to have a nice time.
Yeah,
it's just a nice thing, right?
It's just like it's a teddy bear. Who can say something against a teddy bear? I think everybody who contradicts with my opinion on that is a teddy bear Nazi.
Yeah, and listen, we don't want that. We don't want teddy bear Nazis. No. I mean, who wants that?
What I wanted to bring up is I had the thought before when we were talking about like this Bergkamp thing of like stopping the game, and you said that it also forces the opponent to stop, which I liked a lot, because the interesting thing is that in these moments when you are able to keep the ball under pressure in the attack, then the defenders stop from dropping back, they stand, and what you can do now is obviously like push on the last line with speed. When the last line is dropping, they are dropping already, and they just need to accelerate a little bit to catch you if you run behind them. If they're standing and you run behind them, you are like, there are situations when you do it in the right moment, you're gone. If they don't if you don't recognize you quick enough, if you don't realize it quick enough, you're gone. And in that way, funnily enough, moment and speed, like this is where moment and speed come together. And I was like, I was making a little bit the distinction, or I was creating this big battle here in this podcast between moment-based football and speed-based football. And this is basically,
I liked it. You get people saying that's a false dichotomy, Martin. No, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're going to synthesize now. We're going to synthesize.
We are synthesizing here, and we're saying that if you reduce tempo, you have a bigger advantage of, like, you have a bigger potential of creating a speed advantage from that, because the opponent is standing. When the opponent is running already, it's more difficult to be faster than them. If they're standing, you can be much faster.
Same in 1v1 dribbling often as well, right?
Yeah.
You hear people say, stand them up, stop them, and then use that stasis that to use your speed advantage, right? Yeah. So use that. Okay, we like that. And that's kind of what happened with the Bergkamp-Ljungberg goal as well, isn't it? It's
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Ljungberg was coming from a deeper position with a lot of tempo, and this is what happened. Also, Bayern scored a very interesting goal at the weekend where, like, they had three players in the center and Musiala up top, and Musiala got the ball. Musiala kept the ball a little bit, and all three players from the center were running into depth. So they didn't attack depth with the deep players. They were attacking depth completely with second line players, basically, while they were holding the ball up front. And I think this dynamic is something which when we think very positionally, this is not something we think of. Because, like, when someone is in the midfield, we think he should get the ball into midfield and he should play the pass. We don't think, he is in midfield, then he can attack deep, then he can attack depth very well. This is not something we automatically think when we have a positional view on the game. But we had many players like that who came from, like, deeper zones of the midfield and were really, really dangerous for, like, attacking the box, like Gerrard or Ballack or something like that.
Yeah, and that's something that I found as well in coaching, as coaching players, and if you want to use a possession style, you can fall into that trap of being, lacking that kind of penetration in those situations, right? Because the players are just not doing those runs, those kind of dynamic movements, and the players on the ball.
Or they're doing it in a very predictable way. So the defenders are just picking them up because it's just like, my opponent on my position goes deep. Obviously, I follow him. When he stops, I stop. That's it.
Yeah, so rather than having that kind of Bergkamp moment where there's that ambiguity which kind of freezes them and they don't really know what's happening.
And the run is behind them from a guy which they didn't see before. They are not aware of them.
So I guess, like, end zone games in training as well might be something to do this, penetrating into the end zones behind, trying to give good feedback on some of the attempts that the players are making and trying to bring to their attention the importance of something like, a player slowing that tempo and then making the unpredictable movements to break into depth. Because, like you say, it a lot of the time you see, say midfield players attacking midfield players, and there just isn't those kinds of penetrating runs, and there isn't the intention to do it, right? There isn't the team intention to weaponize the play in that kind of way.
Xavi's Barcelona, for example, was really like, this is the huge shift that Barcelona took with Flick. They from a team which had almost no depth, they became to a team which has, like, very much depth suddenly, especially in the form of Rafinha, and Rafinha is absolutely shining because of that.
Yeah, and that's, again, I felt with Xavi's Barcelona, again, the systemic clock, right? The players, it's, receive, pass, circulate, try and drop the opponent. Once they drop, then we try and make our processes. And it's all very factory-like a lot of the time, and it's, the players are clocking in and clocking out, and they're on the chance production conveyor belt, and they're all doing their little jobs. But maybe you need someone like to wear the pink shirt to work, like Homer Simpson in the episode, right? Someone needs to actually take a little bit responsibility themselves for when is the moment to attack. And I think that certainly as coaches, as analysts, it's probably something we feel intuitively. Again, it's not something you have to do in football. You can play anywhere you like. You can interpret time in any way you like. But I think what we're teasing out here, and we've been talking a while. The sands are falling through the hourglass, right? And some of the things we're teasing out is that there can be some real inherent advantages in perhaps moving some of that control, some of that emphasis from the game model, right? This universal set of principles, of which timings are extremely prevalent, and often some of the most prevalent aspects are derived from timings. Of moving some of that emphasis from, the game model into the players themselves. And hey, if you could get a full team of time interpreters, I mean, what's going to happen? It's like very interesting to think if you had a lot of players with this kind of appreciation of moment and speed, right?
Yeah. I think what is like this is a common thing with positional structure and speed and intensity. All of these three things, and effort is also falls also into this category, which is obviously strongly connected with intensity. All of these four things feel like things that you can that you can get right and always push further. And it's not so much about getting it right based on the situation, positional structure a little bit, but you want to get to a situation where you always have a positional advantage. So there are these rules like I always want to have +1 in build-up because this always gives me an advantage. So okay, this is correct. And then on top of that, I always try maximum effort, maximum speed, maximum intensity, and like this is the thing that I can push. And I think this is a natural approach that many of us learn in our society, that basically the best way to achieve something, the best way to achieve success is putting effort, is like doing the things that you can control, to do them with like as much quantity as possible.
Yeah. Maximize every hour, right? It's like the LinkedIn sort of mindset.
Yeah, exactly. And what sometimes falls under the radar, and if you actually look at how like the biggest changes, the biggest improvements, and the biggest successes probably in human history are probably based on quality, not so much on quantity. Like, I think quantity is an important base, and it's obviously it's better it's better to work hard than to not work hard, but it's even better to work smart, right? And this is also a little bit. This applies to football very, very much as well. That it's like I want the player who's running, I want the player who's pressing, I want the player who's doing the necessary basics, but I also want him to be able to dodge pressure and play the smart pass in the right moment, and to control the pace of the game and such, and be creative.
And I think it's simpler, right, for a coach to approach it from that quantity aspect, right? Because you can measure it very easily, or depending on your resources, you can measure these things, and you can measure the output.
It's more predictable.
Yeah, and you can say things like, we have to have more of that, right? And it's like you're like, oh, I'm doing my job.
It's always one direction.
Yeah.
It's always clear where we go.
And that's my job as the coach, and I'm pushing them towards more of this, more of that. And like you said, this quantity perspective doesn't account enough for the quality, right? The quality of that interaction, the action of the player with their dynamic environment.
And I think this is so important to realize when you talk about a game generally, and football is a game. And in a game, there is no certainty. If in a game there's certainty in the sense of you do this and you win, then everybody's doing that. And then this is not relevant anymore. And this is a little bit what we also see with football, that like this counter-pressing, intensity, running stuff, everybody's doing it to a degree. And the Red Bull teams, their advantage is shrinking because everybody caught up. And actually Red Bull Leipzig and also Salzburg, they had really, really bad results in the Champions League this season, which I think is also a little bit a result of that. And in football and in a game, you never have the certainty of what to do. Games are by nature about finding out what to do, and you always have the uncertainty that you might be wrong, But the quality of a player, talent, and being good in a game is about finding out what's right in the curse, in the speed, in the pressure of the game, finding out what's right and doing this better than your opponent. You can never play without mistakes. You can never play in a way where you never get it wrong. If you do this, you play a very simplified game where you like your system is getting it wrong.
And you're going to be very predictable, right? If you do that all the time as well. And absolutely. Yeah, to play in this, and this is the thing. These quantitative metrics, these aspects that people can focus on, like we mentioned before, there's an upper limit called the human capacity, right? We are human beings, and as we move through time, football develops, all the resources develop, and the physical levels go up and up and up and up, and we see increases in these things in intensity and pressing on all running and all this kind of thing. But that's not going to keep going, right? It's not going to keep improving. Like you mentioned, the 100 meters race, right? It'll hit the plateau pretty soon, I'd imagine, and if not already, with the amount of games that are being that players are, especially we're talking sort of at the top level here, with the amount of games that players are being asked to perform and the load. So then, it seems very apt and very sensible for the emphasis to switch from this onto the quality, the qualia, right, of the experience of these game interpretations of when is this right moment to go into that stillness, that moment of calm, that pausa, where everything becomes a little bit, dreamy and a little bit uncertain. Like you said, it's all a little bit strange in that moment, like Dali's paintings when the clocks are melting, right? And it's like, it's all, it's this surrealist thing. It's all, not so clear. That, I think, those moments, can be appreciated more by coaches and can be investigated more by coaches. And coaches can, and I include myself, obviously, right, can get better at trying to help players interpret those moments. What's happening? How can we use this ambiguity, this strangeness, right, to actually as a stimulus for our imagination, right, to take place, right, to run a little bit wild, and come up with the solutions. So, I think stillness and speed is a nice. Is a nice way to think about it. So you're ahead of the time with your Bergkamp avatar.
Are we going to call the episode Stillness and Speed?
I wasn't. We might do now. I wasn't gonna, but now I think it actually might be the best title for the episode.
It's sort of what we were discussing mostly.
Yeah, I had two working titles, right? I had a few. I think one was Scream If You Want to Go Faster. The other was Out of Time, which I think is a little bit boring now that I say it. I had one more, which was Time Crisis, which was maybe a little, I don't know. But Stillness and Speed might actually be the best. But let's see what happens with that.
The listeners will know how we decided.
Yeah, they can. Please let us know. And this, when you see the title of this episode, feedback. Should we have gone for Time Crisis? should we have gone for Out of Time? Maybe scream. Hey, listen, these are the important points. We are at the end now, I think, Martin.
Time shift.
Please let us know your thoughts. Do you love what we talk about? Do you hate what we talk about? Are you somewhere in between? Martin Raphael, it's been an absolute pleasure, as always. And we are now out of time. But we will be back again very soon as the third circle's journey continues. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you. See you.
The acceleration of information exchange has produced and is producing an effect of a pathological type on the individual human mind and even more on the collective mind. Individuals are not in a position to process the immense and always growing massive information that enters their computers, their cell phones, their television screens, their electronic diaries, and their heads. However, it seems indispensable to follow, recognize, evaluate, process all this information if you want to be efficient, competitive, victorious. The necessary time for paying attention to the fluxes of information is lacking. The consequence is in front of our eyes. Political and economic decisions no longer respond to a long-term strategic rationality and simply follow immediate interests. On the other hand, we are always less available for giving our attention to others gratuitously. Our attention is always besieged, and therefore we assign it only to our careers, to competition and to economic decisions. And in any case, our temporality cannot follow the insane speed of the hyper-complex digital machine. Human beings tend to become ruthless executors of decisions taken without attention.